Okay, so let's just say we want to start over. The Marvel universe has gotten convoluted enough. Let's start over. What does that mean? Hey, this is Perch. Marvel is famous, infamous, famous, one of those things, for saying that they would never reboot, restart, completely redo their universe, and they would thumb their noses a little bit at DC. I think I'm trying to think back to the origins of that statement. A lot of people attribute it to Jim Shooter, but the timing doesn't exactly line up right. But when Crisis of Infinite Earths went on, and there was a little bit of a we're going to clean up our universe. By the way, whenever there's a reboot or a true kind of flushing and start over, the comment that always comes back is, the world has gotten too hard for people to understand, so too difficult. And maybe it's just me, but I always feel slightly insulted when I hear that. It feels a little bit like the company saying, "Hey, our comic books, which are 22-page comic books, are so complicated with all the backstory for you poor little brains to understand that we need to clean it up and make it more accessible because nobody can figure this thing out." And I don't, I shouldn't feel insulted, but I always feel slightly insulted when I hear that. Like, I think I can figure it out. We've got some superheroes or in some spandex or flying around. Pretty sure I can roll with it and figure out what's going on. But there's always this no, 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 it's way too hard. We're gonna need to reboot and make it easier for you. I don't know. It just it feels hard. Imagine somebody saying something along the lines of as Bible is just so many pages. And if you haven't been following along with history, too hard. So we're just gonna clean that all up. We're just gonna reboot a little bit, modernize, you know, have I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, um, but there are times where you write yourself into so much of a stunt based corner that you what are you going to do? So Thor is kind of a good example. So Thor at this point has lost an arm, he's lost an eye, he's king of Asgard. I mean, there's a bunch of things that have happened to Thor that you're kind of like, okay, so how do if we just want classic Thor, is that possible anymore? Or we, you don't want to necessarily put things back inside the bottle, but you've done a lot there. And with the X-Men, you've got Cyclops, and he is been kind of a villain and resurrected, and I mean, just there's a bunch of things happening with the X-Men where it's like, okay, so Rain's dead, Sunspot's dead, Banshee's dead again. Like how are we gonna how do you turn this one around? And that's the challenge that I think Marvel has right now, is because of events and because of the desire. We got to kill people. We've got to, have shocking moments that, are going to change the universe forever. And it's not like it changes the universe forever, but it boxes them in forever. So if we're going to hit the big reset button, how do we do that? And unfortunately, it felt like, and this is just, I'd love to be a fly on the wall and understand some of the conversations that were going on and what people were thinking at the time. But Secret War with Hickman that he built to for, I mean, like five, yeah, depending on your point of view, anywhere from 3 to 8 years, depending on how far you want to go into things. With his run on Fantastic Four or just the Avengers or what have you. So, uh, there was a perfect opportunity at that moment to reboot things more. I mean, it was a soft reboot, but then it really wasn't. And then it was, if you didn't pay any attention to Secret War, then you could just carry on, didn't really matter. And then there's a time jump as well, and some things have changed, and it just and Bendis with X-Men seemed to kind of pay attention to it, but then other writers didn't pay any attention to it, and it was a moment where you could have actually kind of put your foot down and reshuffled some things, but they didn't. And then in the last, I don't know, like 3 years, they they got even more aggressive with the shuffling, if you will, with they made even more changes that box them further into a corner and have done some real damage to characters in the process. Like for example, She-Hulk. That character has gone from stable, intelligent, witty, cool little character to a very odd mix of kind of grunting Hulk like low intellect, rage monster, but inside her head thinks like a lawyer, like she's got coherent thoughts in her head, but not as she expresses herself. Or is that intentional? Who knows? Just a very backwards run of the character. We already mentioned Thor. Captain Marvel has more or less unscathed, I'd say, all along her character. Whether you like the growth or not, at least it's nothing there is irreversible where she's concerned. Captain America has gone Hydra Nazi, and then resurrected as a dream, and then is good, but there's an evil Cap, and there was the Falcon was Cap, and now isn't Cap, and there's just like the Falcon's character has been assassinated throughout this period, where that's just some real damage was done there, and so I mean I can go down the list of characters who have been been kind of thrown into a corner, and it's like on one hand the comics are meant to be timeless, so you can read them in any order. They can survive all kinds of things, but on the other hand they've made changes that are impossible to reverse. So what do you do? What do you do with that? I think so. If you're going to do it, at this point, I think things have gotten so messed up and so convoluted with Marvel that you just kind of have to hit the hard reset button. You had a nice build with Hickman and Secret Wars, and you're not going to you can't really go back and do a do over on that one. So you're going to have to. I mean, at this point, you're going to have some giant event, because everything's got to be an event of a kind of the Molecule Man, Reese Owens has, or Owens, I don't remember, Owen Reese. Why? This Friday. I mean, what are you going to do? I'm tired. But anyway, Owen Reese, he is, his powers have gone out of control. It's threatening to blow up everything in the entire universe. The heroes have to make some huge changes, and it's going to be, catastrophic if they don't kind of get in there. And, the world warps and we get things back on track. That's going to take a super careful planner. And it's funny because I say get things back on track, and there will be fans of some of these changes who are like, "Oh, so you're just going to make She-Hulk into a big old pinup titty girl again?" It's like, no, no, that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to unwind some of the things that are brand destructive. Like Thor. Are we comfortable with the fact that he's always going to be running into battle now with the destroyer arm kind of grafted to the side of his body plus missing an eye? Is that cool? Because that's what a writer, that's what Jason Aaron did in his title. Are we happy with that as a company? Is anybody paying attention as a company? I just wonder. I've talked to a former writer, now does stuff at Image under his own work. Was poised to take on the X-Men, but then decided enough of this. And the comment back was that the writer summits had kind of evolved into, people just throwing wacky ideas out, and then a bunch of people just kind of agreeing, like, yeah, sure, that sounds like fun. Let's do that. And, not thinking about anything longer than kind of, 2 to 3 years, because a lot of people will probably be gone and won't be with the company in 2 to 3 years. So like, who cares? Let's just throw those ideas out there. And the higher ups kind of just treating it like oh, that sounds like fun. Yeah, sure. Why not? If we don't like it, we can always just reverse it. And unfortunately, that logic of we could always just reverse it, there's limits. It's like a rubber band. You can only stretch that so far before, you really can't just reverse it without some pretty catastrophic changes that have to take place. And I think it's there. So how do they go back? How do they unwind? Again, you got to at this point you got to just kind of have that big event, stomp on the reset button hard. But the key there is like, what are you resetting to? I don't think it's valuable to just say, all right, go back to the Captain America that, when we loved him the most and have him fight the Red Skull and Thor. Don't just reset to what was going on in the 90s and call it a day. The goal is not to, just reverse everything to a happier time when the heroes were two dimensional. The key is to scrub out some of those things that are, really hard to write around at this point. Think of the stories you might want to tell with Spider-Man and with Thor and with, think about it. So a good example. Mark Miller in Civil War had Spider-Man reveal his identity. And in doing so, it opened up some new storytelling abilities, certainly, because now he knows Peter Parker, or the world knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But at the same time, it also removed a bunch of stories because you now have no secret identity. So now you've got to kind of grapple. I mean, that was kind of core to some of Spider-Man's persona, and I think that's kind of the key in all of this is really identifying what is the core of these characters. What is the true element that you cannot get rid of. So, for example, Reed Richards, he is an intellectual, and at times he lets his quest for science and knowledge get him into dangerous situations because it's so tempting to really push the limits with science that he forgets some of the more human elements, and that gets him and the family into trouble. But in his heart, he is an explorer. You know he is a knowledge bringer in what he does, and he's brave and heroic and all the rest. But he thinks in a logical, like a Spock way. He thinks in a logical way first, and an emotional way second. And there's positives and negatives to that. It's kind of the core of that character. You can go down the line. What's the core of Spider-Man? Well, there's a lot of debate about that one, but at least with great power comes great responsibility. The idea that even though there's a weight on Spider-Man's shoulders. I think this is another video, which I'll record here in a second. But what is the core of all these characters, and then reboot your universe back to that core, not just some happy world where the characters are familiar, but what is the core of each character? And you should know what the core is of each character, and you should, as editors, be like fanatical about not letting the core of the character get disrupted. Anyway, so that's what I think. What do you think? How would you do it, or is it even necessary? Maybe screw it. Like I said, everything is perfect right now. Why are we talking about reboots? That's nuts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thank you for listening.